Right off the start, I want to say that I too am sick of all the remakes, retreads, remasters, reskins, redos, reissues, whatever you want to call them, that have been made in the last decade. There's too many. But there is one game I think deserves to be remade, and that is Diablo 1. So
stay a while and listen.
And let me lay out my vision for a Diablo 1 remake and why I think we need one. Choose your character, your name, hit start, and you're in the game. Diablo drops you right into the game, no nonsense. If this music doesn't immediately tickle all kinds of nostalgia deep in your bones, then I'm sorry, but you had a rough childhood, and I hope things are better for you now. The iconic town of Tristram, nearly vacant, save for a few brave souls that stay behind to keep evil at bay. The cathedral to the north daring you to enter. An oddly comforting place, as it's your only refuge from the hell that awaits. The intro is dark and foreboding, very 90s CGI. It doesn't spend a lot of time telling us a story, rather it sets the stage, the atmosphere for the adventure you're about to embark on. Snippets of the evil that awaits you within the cathedral, and the chilling high-pitched roar of Diablo himself. One of the first real-time action RPGs ever is still, in my opinion, one of the best. Nearly 30 years later, and the gameplay loop is just as addictive as it's always been. At this point, there have been 4 main entries into the Diablo series, with each game getting progressively bigger and faster and more action-oriented. Let's just take a moment to compare some gameplay from each of the games. Diablo 1 to Diablo 4 is almost unrecognizable. In Diablo 4, it's all go 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 loot pinata all the time. So much loot drops that you basically don't even pick most of it up, and most of it's pointless. Diablo 1 has a much slower, deliberate pace, which makes for a much more frightening and tense experience. So if I think so highly of this game, why do I think it needs a remake? And you can play it on modern hardware, so what's the deal? I think something we've lost in the franchise as the game worlds have become larger and larger is that sense of conquering that mountain, or diving deep into that cave. Diablo 2 has a much larger world, and a lot of smaller dungeons throughout, but none of them ever really go farther than 3 levels deep. Diablo 3 is much the same, lots of horizontal exploration, but very few multi-tiered dungeons. And Diablo 4 has basically just done away with it completely in favor of an open world. Every dungeon has 1 level. The idea of starting out in the cathedral and delving so deep that you eventually reach hell, or as close to hell as you can get, is terrifying. And while the game systems in Diablo are randomized, and the level layouts are randomized, the world itself has a finite amount of levels to it, giving a real tangible sense of accomplishment and progress. Sometimes game designers of old just got it right the first time, and each subsequent game tries to reinvent it for the sake of being new and flashy, and only succeeds in moving further away from the original successful formula. Diablo 2 is the game that everyone talks about, and with good reason. It's a masterpiece. It expands the world, the lore, the items, the characters, the visuals in huge new ways. And it consumed way more of my childhood than I care to admit. Significantly more time than even Diablo 1. But in its grand ambition, it loses what makes Diablo such a great self-contained game. And since Diablo 2 is considered the crown jewel of the series, it was the game that got the remake before the launch of Diablo 4. And Diablo 2 Resurrected is literally a perfect remake. It's exactly what everyone wanted. Diablo 2 with modern graphics tech, making it look the way you think you remember it looking. High five to Vicarious Visions. Diablo 3 moved even further away from the original game, The art style also took a left turn, which further distanced it from Diablo 1 and Diablo 2. So while Diablo 3 may have moved further and further away from the original game, it does do a yearly event as kind of an homage to the original game, with a visual filter to make the game look a little bit more pixelated, and it's a fun hit of nostalgia for a little bit. But overall, Diablo 3 play is vastly different to the original. It's much quicker and much more action-oriented. When Diablo 4 launched, it was more of a hybrid between Diablo 3 and Diablo 2, with slower game progression and itemization and drops, a la Diablo 2 with the fluid combat of Diablo 3, and the skill systems of those two games merged together. Personally, I liked it a lot, but the internet has spoken and Diablo 4 is now just a better looking version of Diablo 3. Basically, the loot pinata I mentioned before. Diablo 2, Diablo 3, and Diablo 4 are all playable on modern PCs, and are all, for the most part, modern games that fill a niche in the action RPG pantheon. And right there, you see it?
Oh, hi, Mark.
That small space is an opening for a Diablo 1 remake. I yearn for the slower paced gameplay of Diablo 1, but with modern graphics and sound. The huge difficulty spikes of the original, the stun locks, the potion reliance, but most of all, a retelling of the game's original story, and controller support. Remade cutscenes, more in-game cutscenes, lore quests, more fleshed out quests like the introduction to the Butcher for instance. Side note, Diablo 4 did something amazing with the Butcher demon. One, they made the Butcher into an uber powerful kind of demon rather than just a one-off bespoke character. And two, they made him terrifying. Having him show up at random in dungeons was a stroke of genius.
Fresh meat!
And this concept could be easily applied to a Diablo 1 remake. Instead of having the Butcher's lair, you could have the dying guy at the entrance of the cathedral tell you the same basic story, that the demon killed his party and he barely made it out alive, but add in details about the demon seemingly coming out of nowhere and murdering everyone. You head into the cathedral, go about your business, seemingly forgetting about that story you just got told, and then bam! The Butcher spawns, and with a deep guttural fresh meat. It's a similar scenario to Diablo 4's iteration, but much more frenzied and much more frightening. Okay, tangent aside, as I was saying, this is a perfect chance to recontextualize the story of Diablo and the subsequent games. Let me lay out my vision for what could be. We would start the story showing the Herodrum sealing away Diablo deep under the monastery, and then flashing forward to the arrival of King Leoric as he sets up shop in Tristram. We see him going mad as Diablo's influence grows stronger, and Lazarus's betrayal as he kidnaps Leoric's son Albert and sacrifices him to be the human host for Diablo. That would be an awesome setup and one hell of an opening cutscene. I envision the game world being relatively small by today's standards, but having Tristram truly be an abandoned town amongst a forest of terrors. Having a fairly large chunk of land to explore and to do side quests in would also allow a bit of breathing room to tell more stories based on the lore and characters, and it would give you a bit of a break from the cathedral. Also, just show me a map with Tristram on it in relation to everything else. I love that kind of stuff. Like, show me the Diablo 4 kind of map, but for the western part of the world. Speaking of the cathedral, there are 16 levels to the game, each descending further into the hellish labyrinth. I would extend that to 20 to 25 levels and maybe add in a couple more side quests / secret quests to discover, just to give it a little bit longer playtime and have the build up to fighting Diablo pack a little bit more punch. The only change I'd make to the gameplay is removing the stilted movement and use the Diablo 4 style movement, but everything else would remain the same. Also, no dodging. Something the series moved away from immediately as soon as Diablo 2 launched was the open-ended nature of character progression. There were 3 starting classes, but they were really just different character sprites and some reshuffled starting stats. As a warrior, you could learn all the spells in the game, for instance, or as a sorcerer, you could use bows instead of casting spells. Weirdly though, the rogue was the only character that could learn the cooking spell. Never did fully understand that. The preceding joke was brought to you by history. Sexism. We've been here since the beginning. Diablo 1 is already pretty close to being a roguelike, The levels are all randomized, the items you get are randomized, even the skills that drop from shrines and from bookcases are all random. So it's got all the ingredients there to make for a very interesting roguelike. And this could make for a really interesting revamped version of the game mechanics. What made Diablo 1 so terrifying to play, and albeit really cheap and frustrating, was stun lock. Attacks have a chance to stun you and interrupt whatever you're doing, taking potions, attacking, trying to run away, spell casting, anything. So an early mini-boss like the Butcher could very easily cut you down, even if you were a higher level than him. This can feel cheap, because, well, it kind of is, but I would argue that it is also an incentive to play differently. In modern Diablo, you move into a room and utterly annihilate everything in it in seconds, or you move around the room at lightning speed as it fills with damage numbers. The danger in the modern Diablos then becomes getting one-shotted by a monster you might not have even noticed amongst the mob. The slower gameplay would be a real breath of fresh air. I think the modern Diablo 4 engine would service this really well. With so many enhancements and the ability to make the environment more destructible, it would make the game feel much more cohesive. In terms of the visual style, Diablo 1 is a lot more gothic than the other entries in the series, and I'd hope that Blizzard would really lean into this. In the lead up to Diablo 2, Blizzard released a cinematic that was meant to bridge the gap story-wise between the two games. But the cinematic's visual language was much closer to the original Diablo than what ended up shipping in Diablo 2, and I think this cinematic would be a great starting point for the visual identity of a modern Diablo remake. And Blizzard has shown us just how far they're willing to push the gore and horror elements of the series with Diablo 4, which features some of the most grotesque imagery from all 4 entries in the series. Okay, so to recap, this is what I want from a Diablo 1 remake. A recontextualization and retelling of the Diablo 1 story so it fits better within the whole Diablo world and universe that Blizzard has created. And I think I speak for everybody when I say we want more cinematics. Blizzard does it the best in the business, and it would be amazing to get a retelling of the Diablo 1 story with such incredible visuals. In fact, I want a Diablo movie. Just make a Diablo movie or a TV show. Make it happen.
Wow!
Modern Diablo 4 graphics and sound, but with the freeform gameplay of Diablo 1. And as an added bonus, it would be awesome to play the game as a roguelike. All the ingredients are there, they just need to mix them together. And if for no other reason, we get to go back to Tristram and listen to that sweet, sweet music one more time. So what do you guys think? Do you agree that Diablo 1 needs a remake? Let me know in the comments. Give us a like if you liked the video, and give us a sub if you think we're worthy. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.